I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.
Lawyers of Reddit, what is the biggest well you didn't tell me that moment you've had in your career? I had a client who claimed she was discriminated against by her employer due to disabilities she sustained after a car crash. She said her disabilities were so bad she couldn't drive or sit at her desk for any amount of time, and her company refused to accommodate her by letting her work remotely. Needless to say, it was embarrassing when opposing counsel told me my client played in a full contact lingerie football league and had telecast videos of her on YouTube playing, running, getting tackled, and dancing in the end zone on the very date her doctor, who lost his license, gave her a note saying she was bedbound. I showed her the footage and she continued to lie despite having a fucking stat sheet for receiving yards when she was supposedly in the hospital. Never been angrier at a client. Recently had a client's fact witness, an employee of the client, reveal at his deposition that he had signed an agreement which pays him a substantial bonus if the client wins the lawsuit. Our jaws dropped. How can you possibly give believable factual testimony at trial if you stand to earn a windfall if one side prevails? Ugh. My wife's most recent guy said his company fired him on a racial issue. Turned out the employer had an overtly racist, anti-Asian culture. Oh, but the client also kept coming to work and threatening the employer with a handgun. In a funeral home. When defense counsel asked my personal injury client, a tall, 50-ish, leather vest wearing biker, to describe the worst part of the neck injury he suffered when his motorcycle was hit by a car, he calmly replied, "The worst part? That I can't give oral sex, you know, cunnilingus, as well as I used to." After a long pause, defense counsel asked him to repeat the answer. My client did. He wasn't faking. He seemed genuinely sad. It was the first time I'd heard about that from him. It was heartfelt, unusual, and interesting on a number of levels. Not too much to tell, really. My brother and I were having drinks. He'd gotten angry over something and walked off. I followed him to find someone trying to steal his suitcase which had pretty much everything he owned in it. My brother and the mugger were wrestling over the suitcase, and just as I got there the mugger swung a knife at his gut. I knocked the knife from his hand, only to have his accomplice step out of the alley and punch me in the back of the head with a coward punch. I was unconscious before I hit the ground, so the rest of this is from the witness report. I faceplanted and bounced/rolled over, to which the first mugger stomped on my mouth, breaking 13 teeth in total, including snapping my front teeth off and forcing them through my face under the bottom lip. At this point the accomplice started yelling, "You killed him. Run." The mugger grabbed the knife and they both fled. No idea if they were ever caught. When it came to getting help from the Victims of Crime Fund, they paid for getting crowns put on the front teeth and reimbursing some of my sick leave, but that was it. Had to have 11 molars that were completely shattered removed, and the head trauma has had lasting effects including migraines, depth perception issues and trouble losing weight. I represented a client who was suing for jaw and mouth related injuries. I retained the services of a regular dentist to act as her expert witness. 2 days before our impending trial, my client casually mentions that she will be arriving at the courthouse with her dentist because they had become romantically involved and lived together for the past a year. She had more than a year at her disposal to tell me this little bit of wonderful news, and so I immediately became more agreeable to a last minute pre-trial settlement. Had a client tell me that they had just signed a bunch of claim releases that ultimately tanked their case after I had explicitly told them to let me look at all documents prior to signing, since I had seen something similar that they had signed almost a year back. They'd signed one of these while we were gathering documents and about to take a deposition, and when I saw my client's signature on it, I just facepalmed because his signature ended up waiving away any rights they'd had to payment. Ugh. Obligatory not a lawyer, but I watched this unfold as the foreperson of a jury. Defendant decided to be his own lawyer, accused of pulling over and switching drivers in a car while being pursued by police for driving without a license while on probation for DUI. Officer pursuing was the same officer who arrested him for the original DUI. Playing Perry Mason, defendant put his buddy on the stand and asked point blank who was driving the car that day. Buddy replied, "You mean before or after we switched drivers?" It was all we could do to keep a straight face. I worked for insert major airline and found out through a mind-numbing contract review that they were double dipping. They had entered into an exclusivity agreement with one insert major airline repair provider and, without telling me, that had asked me to engage in a separate exclusivity agreement with another provider so they could get a second $25mm rebate. They intentionally had two separate attorneys owe each transaction, so we wouldn't know about the double dipping. I don't know if $25mm sounds like a lot to you, but when you're talking about airplanes, which cost $, I'm not going to get disbarred, so you can make a little extra money. Quit on the spot. The most common is that they don't have prior arrests or convictions. That usually ends when you hand them an inch-thick catalog of their activities since their 18th birthday. The post-violation phone calls are fun. Someone will violate their bond or a protective order before trial. They will get caught. They will then call and attempt to explain that everyone was lying. One guy showed up for a status on probation date, something that only happens with people who have a habit of getting violated, and he reeked of weed. I informed him he was going to be dropping that morning. He stated that he would drop clean. I said fuck it. Probation took him down. He was back and in cuffs in 15 minutes. He had tried to poke a hole in a condom filled with clean piss to beat the drop. The probation officer was looking in a mirror at this guy's meat as he pulled the piss condom out of his boxers and tried to create a stream with a needle. His pants were covered in someone else's piss because that's how stabbing condoms works.